Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of stupidity. Not the I'm bad at math kind, but the kind of stupidity which would lead to NASA losing $125 million Mars orbiter because one team used metric units whilst another used imperial. The first big reveal I have for you is that the way we think about stupidity is itself stupid. We think of stupidity as just a single thing. You're either stupid or you aren't, and we have one word for it. But we all know that smart people can do stupid things. And this is because there are 7 different types of stupidity that affect all of us. And they're not what you think. Some forms of stupidity are actually made worse when you are too clever. We find our cultural obsession with IQ and being a genius really blinds us to the various ways that we can choose to be stupid. And yes, I do mean the word choose, because stupidity is often a deliberate act. It's a way that we can protect ourselves from uncomfortable truths. But fear not, as always, the inversion principle is here to save us. We find that the way to get smarter often isn't about adding intellectual horsepower or memorizing an encyclopedia. It's often about how do we stop ourselves from being stupid. So hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology podcast with me, Sam Webster Harris, diving into the science of self-improvement as always. Over the next 35 minutes, I'll break down each type of stupidity, from things like being an overconfident expert to ego-based stupidity. Through the episode, I'll be answering the question, how can we recognize and avoid these mental traps before they derail our decisions, careers, and relationships? Lots to learn, and I'm sure you'll think about things a little bit differently afterwards. So please stay tuned.
You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
To the salon owners, the spa experts, the med spa mavens, those who make every cut, every massage, every facial feel like a small miracle. At Boulevard, they see you. That's why they built the first and only client experience platform that combines online scheduling, marketing, messaging, and payments, and works as beautifully as you do. See for yourself at joinblvd.com/Spotify. Boulevard, software for self-care businesses.
So we'll start with the start, that is the obvious one I've mentioned, stupidity as just pure stupidity, which is lack of cognitive ability, lack of brain power, and it is a form of stupidity. It basically pertains to individuals who exhibit deficiencies in cognitive abilities, specifically their capacity to think and reason clearly. Typically, these individuals possess a low IQ, although there are plenty of forms of stupidity that are not just to do with IQ, and they may struggle with tasks such as verbal reasoning tests, puzzles, spotting patterns in data, comprehending nuances of language, or struggle to follow logical chains of reasoning. So when they may be confronted by some complexity in their choices or decisions, they may perceive this as all meaningless chaos and not really understand what to do and just go for the instant option that they feel seems good. Even after receiving clear, repeated explanations, they may struggle to understand the rules of a game or any intricate concept. So learning just poses a significant challenge, and they may learn very, very slowly, if at all. And learning and intelligence are deeply intertwined, which interestingly took AI scientists rather a long time to grasp. Instead of striving to create an intelligent machine from the outset, it seemed better that building a dumb machine that was capable of rapid learning was a much better approach, which is how AI builders now build programs that will absolutely smash people at games of Go, for example, even though they didn't even teach them the rules of Go. They just taught them how to learn and optimize stuff. So why might someone be stupid? Well, genetic reasons, just inherited cognitive abilities of how your brain works, environmental influences such as growing up with a lack of resources or food for brain development, or in a culture that places minimal emphasis on actually learning anything like writing and numbers, or critical thinking and learning how to question the bias and work things out for yourself, or having like actual information given to you that is just completely incorrect, like being told that the earth is flat or that King John Il is a god, etc. Certainly lead poisoning makes people crazy, and mercury and stuff. And they reckon that the amount of lead that was in America after the war led to a loss of over 1 billion IQ points of the residents of America during that time. Stupidity is basically an inability to spot or identify patterns or follow logical sequences. And it is what we normally think of when we hear the word stupid. And this helps us understand the rest of this, where I'll show where we also have stupid behaviors, but not just due to cognitive ability, but due to other things that cause us to not look for or spot patterns in front of us and make sense of the world around us. So, number 2, stupidity through ignorance. This is also commonly associated with stupidity, and this could be defined as a lack of knowledge or understanding about a given subject. Now, ignorance doesn't directly cause stupidity, but it gives you an inability to necessarily understand directly. And if you don't understand that you are ignorant of something, you're less likely to have empathy or acknowledge that you might even not know what you're talking about. And this is why a 20-year-old might not make a very good politician, because they've never actually been through a financial crisis or a war in their country. And they might not understand the implications of some of the things that they think are good might actually have down the line, etc. But a 20-year-old could still be quite humble and realize that they don't know these experiences and make some good decisions of what to do and just ask help around the things that they're ignorant about and actually be a very good ruler, for example, as has been demonstrated in history. So basically, an individual that lacks a reservoir of experience, skills, or knowledge could struggle to tackle new challenges or complex questions effectively if they find themselves in positions where they should use it, where they should know more stuff, if they aren't willing to learn and they think they already know everything. But you may also be ignorant due to lack of essential tools, frameworks to comprehend the world, skills like verbal or mathematical aptitude, or basic grasp of geography and maps and understanding where the world is and how different parts of it relate to each other and political systems, and actually understanding the economics of like the world, why it works this way, how businesses do business with each other, how countries interact with each other. These are all actually very fundamental, important concepts to really start to understand why your coffee is this price and why some clothes shops work and others don't, etc. It's quite interesting, but it takes a reasonable amount of time to actually know how a lot of this stuff works. And now it was noted by a researcher a long time ago that actually just reading something like a newspaper and having a vague understanding of its content does demand a lot of general knowledge that many of us take for granted, and we don't realize how many people don't understand and they just read something and take just the surface level of it. So background knowledge in any domain really serves like a platform. It's like water for a fish to swim in. If you don't have background knowledge, you can't actually understand the things around you. And so a lot of us will behave stupidly around some stuff because we're used to maybe knowing the right answers on some things. And then we'll just read other stuff and we're only given like a small bit of information. We think we already know everything when actually we know nothing about the situation in Iraq, for example. But we've heard one headline and we're like, yeah, we know everything about war and why there's people that are like wasting all their money with this. And we really don't know. And that's one way you can often be stupid, is just making assumptions based on a small amount of information when actually you need a lot of information to be able to understand it. So even people with a very high IQ or other forms of intelligence can really mess up this form of stupidity and make bad decisions or come to bad conclusions and spot patterns incorrectly due to thinking that they know more than they actually do and being rather blind to that lack of knowledge. And that makes you do stupid things. So now, number 3, overconfident expert stupidity. So this relates a bit to the last one and might also be defined as the fish out of water. So as we've seen, that stupidity can come from lack of cognitive ability or lack of knowledge and ability to think critically. That is, of course, incomplete, and there are many other ways. It fails to account for things like the fish out of water stupidity, which is where an individual with a powerful intellect who's accumulated extensive knowledge in several specific domains, perhaps, and would be commonly perceived as intelligent, especially in their particular areas. The problems then arise when they think their intelligence translates into other areas because they're used to being brilliant in everything, that they know that they can do, and they just assume that they can do things that they can't do. They'll tend to just take their existing expertise for granted and believe it grants them proficiency across all domains. And you'll see this with several podcasters, for example, who were good at one thing, and then they'll just talk about anything else in the world like they know everything they're talking about. And you'll see Jordan Peterson get like some expert on a topic on his show. If he's talking about something that I know about more than he does, he'll just say stuff that doesn't make any sense if you're actually an expert in the knowledge. But because of he thinks he knows what he's talking about, he just comes at it with the same kind of language, the same kind of like, oh, I know everything. And he just really makes himself look stupid if you actually know what he's talking about, which then makes you question if all the other things he talks about are also dumb, and has led me to not like listening to Jordan Peterson as much, as well as all his crazy right-wing stuff, which also isn't helpful. Anyway, back to the overconfident experts. Now, they may well be correct in assuming that their intelligence could give themselves an advantage in learning about the new domain, because there is obviously the concept of general intelligence and ability. But the issues really arise when they overestimate their abilities in an unfamiliar territory, and as a result, just makes some very grave errors in judgment. If you look at places like Twitter or podcasting, you'll see scientists, historians with really well-respected academic brilliance making fools of themselves by coming out with stuff that just makes no sense. And they may not even be aware that they've crossed into something that they don't know about, and it really ends quite badly for them. Also, you can look at the example of like the bankers during the 2008 financial crisis. They were just like, right, we run the banking industry. We know how this works. We're not going to cause a problem because we're just making money doing this. We're never going to like have it all collapse in on ourselves. And then the crash happened and they were like, oh, we thought it wouldn't happen. And, just people get out of their field quite easily. So that's the overconfident expert stupidity. And now we have perhaps my favorite one, which trips up lots of companies, political systems, and individuals. And this is systemic stupidity, also known as perhaps rule-based stupidity. When we think about stupidity or discuss it, we often think of stupidity as an individual trait, and we'll label people as smart or stupid. But even among like intellectuals, this can really be quite dangerous, because even when you have smart people together, they still can behave quite stupidly. And people have been categorizing people as smart or stupid for years and years. And it's really unhealthy because firstly, I've seen plenty of people with low IQ just make really good life decisions and like play within the realms of their powers and actually just run a good solid business. And you can also see smart people absolutely mess up a business, just constantly trying to do too many things and screw their life over. But also when it comes to systemic stupidity, you can still have a bunch of smart people in an organization, but it dies because they're just forced to play in a game where the rules aren't set up for them to behave sensibly. And you can see this in politics as well, where you just have like two large groups of people where if one side has extreme views, you just have to have opposing views to back that. And when you get to the point where like one side believes that the other side will actually prefer to throw them in jail or kill them than to rule in a sensible way that like keeps both sides safe, then the sensible side supposedly will then feel perfectly reasoned to their judgment to lock the other side away because of that's saving them. And you end up having like a dictatorship, and you can have smart people ending up creating this stupid scenario. Hello, America. Anyway, the point is that stupidity can extend far beyond an individual's traits and manifest as a systemic issue. For example, the Romans, although very, very intelligent and the most forward-thinking and successful nation of their period, did fail to make any significant advances in mathematics, which is really surprising when you think about like how good they were at engineering and so many other things. But ultimately, their numeral system really hindered complex calculations. And if you contrast to like the Arabic system and their numbers, which eventually came to Europe in the Middle Ages, that facilitated much easier manipulation, which collectively just elevated the entire civilization's level of intelligence around maths and their ability to do things. And so just the tools and platforms that we use can just keep us enslaved in stupidity, even if you are a person who possesses intelligence. Now, we know the Romans had many intelligent people and really like gave themselves a platform for those intelligent people to do their best work compared to the rest of the world at the time, even though there were, of course, intelligent people in any other nation that may have been coming up against the Romans, but they, of course, didn't get to do very good work either because they were held back by the rest of their nation and the way that their society worked, etc. So if you look into complexity theory, which sounds as fun as it is, it's not just that stupidity is the absence of intelligence or knowledge. It also arises from just persistently using the incorrect kind of algorithms or rules with which the intelligence can be applied. So imagine that you hand someone a Rubik's Cube. You have 3 possibilities. They already know how to solve a Rubik's Cube and the algorithms to get through it quickly, and they will appear very intelligent. Or they may have learned the wrong algorithms, which would make it really hard for them to solve it, and it will take them like days to work out what they're doing. Or they may just have no idea how to solve a cube, attempt it at random and probably fail. And so you can have a stupid person actually able to solve a Rubik's Cube because they just know how to do it, and an intelligent person who doesn't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, and it could take them like many days to get there. And just that difference in knowledge and application of some algorithms can really advance how fast something can get done. And if you're in a society or organization where things aren't known or the incorrect tools are used, then you're not going to get very far. At least if you don't pretend to know any algorithms to solve a Rubik's Cube, you might have a chance of getting there. Whereas if you think you've got algorithms to solve it, but they're the wrong algorithms, you're never going to solve it because you're going to keep on applying things and it's going to keep on failing. And yet in normal life, people will really run through their whole lives with the wrong kind of algorithms running, where they just think that what they're doing is going to build happiness, and it keeps on failing to build happiness, but yet they keep on trying it because society tells you that those actions are the things that you should do to become happy, and you haven't worked out how to be happy for yourself because if society keeps on telling you that those are the things that you should do. And it's the same with organizations, people saying you just have to climb the ladder to get to these things, but then you actually aren't necessarily helping the organization if all you're optimizing for is how to climb the ladder rather than how to do your best work or to do the job in that company that makes you really happy. So you just keep on doing it for fun rather than getting to the point where you manage too many people that isn't actually your skill set. So there's lots of faulty algorithms in society, in companies that actually end up pushing clever people to run faulty ideas through their life that make things worse for themselves. And there are just lots of examples of this in ideology and politics that just lead to cognitive inflexibility. Irrespective of which side someone may support, they'll still end up making bad decisions. And this can also lead us to just be attracted to individuals who will tell us some clear stories that sound like they have good chains of reasoning, but actually have some faulty algorithms in what they're selling us, and just leads to things constantly not actually working out how we expect. So in many cases, stupidity doesn't actually arise from a lack of mental material capacity, but often from an excess of mental capacity, but applying that extra mental capacity down chains of logic that don't quite work. And so in fact, the ability to carry the abundance of information allows us to carry concepts in our minds that we can absorb from others that actually aren't helpful. We'll inherit these powerful algorithms of how to be successful that are based on flawed theories and misleading facts and just captivating stories or faulty metaphors just from misplaced intuition somewhere that just keeps on being carried along and just doesn't get fixed. And we'll accumulate this knowledge feeling like we're building solid knowledge within ourselves, feeling that society knows best. And yet actually this systemic knowledge is stupid and it really is unhelpful for us. And it stops us from actually being able to solve our own problems or spot the real patterns in front of us, even though they're there. So as the saying goes, it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble, but what you think you know that isn't. So that was systemic stupidity, which always makes me happy to think about how to just be more of an individual and just question things from the root rather than just asking why as much as possible, which is why it's so good to study the philosophers of the world. And now let's go into overthinking stupidity, which is perhaps the opposite of being philosophical about everything.
This episode is sponsored by Cozy Earth. We all know that a fundamental pillar of a good day is, of course, a good night's rest. To which the legitimate question back is, how? Well, there are many things you can do, but one upgrade that had a surprising improvement for me was my sheets. Some people might choose to use Cozy Earth's sheets because they are softer than silk and get softer with every wash. Or they might choose to use Cozy Earth because their products are made with sustainably sourced viscose from bamboo. Or perhaps because they've been one of Oprah's favourite things 5 years in a row. But for me, it's the fact that they naturally temperature regulate, and this property is both cooling and warming, which is pretty essential for me to sleep in the same bed as my partner, who likes to have 5 duvets at once. And these sheets have been by far the best thing for a good night's sleep for both of us, we've found. You can try Cozy Earth sheets completely risk-free for 100 nights and simply send them back if you don't love them. And if the lifetime of a product keeps you up at night, well, every bedding product has a 10-year guarantee. To make sleep a priority now, visit cozyearth.com and use my exclusive code GROWTH for up to 40% off Cozy Earth's best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. That's cozyearth.com, code GROWTH, and if you get a post-purchase survey, tell them you heard about Cozy Earth right here.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Now, overthinking stupidity. So, if you've ever read the book Super Forecasting by Philip Tetlock, he's a psychologist who, during his graduate days, witnessed an experiment that shed some light on the peculiarities of human intelligence. The experiment basically put a bunch of Yale undergraduate students, very smart people, against a rat, and what they were trying to predict was the location of food in a simple maze that had 2 options for the rat to go down, or the students to choose from. And basically, the experimenter created a rule that the food was going to be placed either in the left side of the maze or the right side of the maze. And when I say maze, it's really not a maze, it's just a path with a left and a right. And what they did was they say 60% of the time, we're just going to put the food on the left and 40% on the right. And they didn't tell the rat, obviously they couldn't, but they didn't tell the rat where the food would be. And they also didn't tell the students where the food would be. Now, the students tried to come up with like a very complex algorithm to work out why sometimes food was appearing on the left or sometimes on the right. They achieved a success rate of 52% that they would guess it right, which is a tiny bit better than statistical chance, but not that great. The rat, however, basically learned that food normally appeared on the left side a bit more than the right, so the rat just always went left, which meant that it got 60% accuracy. So the rat worked out this algorithm better than the students, which is kind of hilarious, but also shows why that humans just like to overthink things and expect to have something deeper than there really is. Smart individuals often perceive themselves as intelligent, and they'll tend to dislike a strategy that accounts for inevitability of errors. So the idea of having a strategy of just always going left, where 40% of the time you're going to be wrong, just doesn't really sit right. You just have to think that there must be a way to predict that, like, there is a way that you can guess left or right each time, even though actually it's just relying on a statistical random number generator that just goes left slightly more. So even when faced with apparent randomness, we'll refuse to surrender to the possibility that something is random. In like, our intellectual ambition as a human that's kind of smart will drive us to just try and impose some form of smartness and intelligence on the world, when often there is no such thing as pure right answer. It is just random. So our ambitions for intelligence can lead to insights and innovations, but it can also lead to stupidity and errors, which we will just skillfully defend as the right answers and lie to ourselves. Actually, there is no such thing as like a right answer. There is just some random statistics going on. Once a clever person or a stupid person adopts a mistaken belief, trying to persuade them that they're doing something wrong is a very, very hard task because of if you have some cognitive sophistication in your abilities, you will be able to explain your flawed thinking better and outsmart people in your explanation, even though your explanation is absolute bull crap, but you'll believe it anyway because you just have this inherent idea that you're probably right and there's something sophisticated going on. Now, this isn't just like mathematical IQ or pattern recognition, but also verbal fluency. When people are very good at just speaking, they can just explain things really quickly and lie to themselves and others around them. And that makes their whole life much worse, even though it's like a useful skill for many other things. Anyone who can eloquently speak off the cuff can usually find immediate explanations to justify their thoughts or their beliefs and think that just by speaking these words that it'll sort of magically materialize into truth, even though they can't manipulate the laws of physics in the world around them, but they just think that by speaking, they can do these things. Going a bit far down that. Another manifestation of overthinking can be observed in things like products and apps or movies crammed with so many different things in them, like ingenious features, which actually loses the substance and gets away from the usefulness of it. So an app that's got so many features is that it's just bloated and unusable. A movie with so many different plot lines and characters, it's just confusing and unwatchable. Yet as a creator, you often think that more is better. And we can just really overthink what someone needs and just add more and more things, where it takes a genius like Steve Jobs to really concentrate on simplicity and just be okay, what can we hide from everyone and just create an app or a product that just had just the elements they absolutely need and nothing else. And the same his work in Pixar is really boiled down stories to just what are the things that will give you a magical experience, and that's remove everything that is excessive from this story. In general, this has been something that has been discussed since Socrates around the concept that there is an intricate relationship between human intelligence and its amazing potential to then generate stupidity through its intelligence, but it is just one we have to watch out for. And now on to number 6, emergent or organizational stupidity. Now this certainly does relate into systemic stupidity, but it has a few quirks that are worth talking about. Emergent stupidity is a phenomenon often observed in organizations that make questionable decisions, and it becomes challenging to attribute those choices to any one specific individual, even in hindsight afterwards. And surprisingly, there might not be any inherently unintelligent people involved in the decision, and often they might all be very intelligent. And if you look at a company like Enron, brilliant people involved, and yet they completely screwed up the business. And stupidity in the context of some businesses can just emerge in the same way that intelligence manifests in the behavior in a flock of geese or an ant colony, or interactions between cells and synapses in the human brain, very small, simple processes that create something very clever. In the same way, you can have some very small processes that just create something very stupid out of very clever people. So when individuals within a group follow a few simple rules and cooperate, their collective behavior can exhibit intelligence. And that's why humanity is so great, because any one person could not have built any of the amazing things in the world alone. It takes combinations of groups and teams to actually build anything of brilliance. And the human machine, as it is, exhibits vastly more intelligence than the sum of its parts. However, the opposite can also happen and can lead to outcomes significantly worse. So for a leader in an organization, it's essential to reflect on the simple rules that your people adhere to and the culture that you are creating. Even when people are not consciously thinking about it, and you really want to focus on questioning why these rules are in place and whether they're going to foster intelligent overall decisions or stupidity. And if you just look at human evolution, the drive to avoid stupidity isn't necessarily that high in the list of things that we've evolved. Our primary focus has just been on survival and reproduction, which does involve getting along with others. However, it's important to note that being really clever and fostering harmonious relationships are not necessarily interrelated. These can often conflict with each other because we'll want to avoid disagreeing with the group, and that can lead to collective intelligence in general that is better. And this is why we learn from our elders and why we make decisions based on other people, and often democratic thinking is usually the best. But sometimes contributing to a pool of people's individuals can just lead to decisions that aren't the best for anyone. And when we agree with the consensus or agree with a leader, we can really miss out on the full intelligence of the individuals involved and make the process worse for ourselves. The human desire to not stand out sometimes or disagree with others can really just lead us to kind of agreeing with things that we shouldn't be agreeing with. And this is something you really want to look at if you are in an organization that you think maybe isn't doing things correctly, or if you run an organization. A lot of this does relate to the systemic stupidity, so I'm not going to go on too much more about this. Lastly, we get to ego-based stupidity, which actually maybe is about on par with my love of the systemic stupidity. Ego-based stupidity is a fundamental part of the human existence, again, and intertwines deeply with emotions and one's sense of self. Within this category, there are many subtypes as well, but the core principle is that when individuals feel insecure, they're more likely to engage in self-imposed ignorance. And there's no other way to describe this other than self-protection. And so when these moments come up for us to be vulnerable and we kind of avoid them, we'll just jump into ego-based stupidity. That's like shouting at a partner when you've made a mistake. That's not telling your organization that you work for that they're being really stupid and just agreeing with everyone else. That's lying to yourself about an investment you made that's losing money and being like, oh, I made a good decision, and always looking at ways to protect yourself rather than just flag that you've been a complete idiot and that you need to do something about it. So some fun facts is there is a clear correlation between susceptibility to conspiracy theories and feelings of anxiety. So when we have more anxiety in the population in general and just in the world, we're more likely to believe conspiracy theories and really stupid based stuff, because if we just lack the real sense of control and don't like to hear things like we need to do something about it or it's our fault, and we just want to hear a conspiracy theory, we can blame others and just be stupid. You could see this based around like 2016 when both like the US and the UK became like just engulfed in conspiracy theories around Brexit and Trump, and many intelligent individuals just succumbed to feeling of like helplessness and fear around the whole things that were going on, and just led them to adopt foolish beliefs of these conspiracy theories were going on just because they didn't really want to deal with like the facts. And political extremists and conspiracy theorists really crave the security of certainty rather than having to deal with like uncertain, difficult situations. It's not solely like the ideology or conspiracy theory that draws people in, but it's the community that forms around it and the certainty and safety in numbers around believing something that means that you are the problem. And these things become like a community where like your beliefs actually aren't so important that they're factual as just serving as a wristband to be accepted and around others that also have the same belief. And often to safeguard their place within a group, individuals will go to great lengths to demonstrate unwavering loyalty to these beliefs and disregard the opinions of outsiders and just embrace and propagate really foolish ideas to just make themselves even stupider. And it's amazing how much this happens. It's insane, but it does. Again, when I mentioned Twitter around experts going out of their area of expertise to talk about stuff, there's also an undercurrent of like insecurity and status anxiety that people have, and they'll often go beyond their own beliefs. They just say stuff to fit in and to try and make themselves look cooler. So like on Twitter, there was quite a lot of intelligent people talking about book Sapiens as being a bad book just because they wanted to look cool, and because of other intelligent people had said that it's a bad book, and they were like, well, I'm so intelligent that people like, it must be terrible, even though it was just a well-written history book that just made a lot of fundamentally difficult concepts to understand easier. Like there's nothing wrong with the book. People just wanted to look cool and had anxiety, and like their ego made them make a stupid decision. Anyway, that was like an example, but we just become like ego status monkeys where we just want to look cooler and we can't deal with the idea that we aren't as good as we say we are. And places like Twitter just really provides a platform to foster ideological communities and subcultures that frequently just clash with each other and make them clash even harder by wanting to just make the others look even stupider to make themselves look better and feel better. But actually both sides end up saying things that don't really make that much sense, and they're just feeding their own egos and getting lost in the world of stupidity. Now, there's certainly plenty of ways I can go into ego-based stupidity of how this then interacts our like investment decisions, our relationships, health, And our ego just really doesn't like the idea that we are making bad decisions. And we just come up with ways to reason why we're slightly special and individual, and things that we might advise to other people. We just have some kind of intellectual way of describing to ourselves is okay for us. And ultimately, learning to quiet our own ego and just look at the bird's eye view and just look down at yourself and be like, this is a crap decision, this is a good decision, is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself, and very, very hard. So I'm trying at that, and maybe this has given you some examples of different forms of stupidity that occur and how you can deal with them, rather than jumping to your ego and being like, well, I don't do any of these and I'm great and perfect and nothing for me to change here. But isn't it funny how many people screw up their lives doing these things that I've heard about on this podcast? So in conclusion, the reality is that stupidity is often a deliberate choice. Individuals can make themselves stupid where it serves their purposes. And curiously, the ability for humans to do this is just remarkable amongst all species. And sometimes this can be beneficial and sometimes it can be terrible. A very influential figure was the English psychoanalyst Wolfgang Bion, whose experiences during the First World War profoundly influenced his ideas. He observed that the way people suppress their capacity for thinking and reasoning during times of conflicts, both figuratively and literally, as they enter into battle, was really remarkable. And Bion's theory of learning came from his recognition that we don't always wish to acquire knowledge. We just want to believe, perhaps, that the other people are awful, etc. And it's not merely missing out on information, but instead unconsciously resisting or rejecting knowledge that doesn't fit our worldview. And this is amplified at most during conflict, which is why it's also really bad in politics when you should get to the point of distrusting your opponents, where you actually think they're going to do bad things to you, because then you think it's okay to do bad things to them, and life just descends into awfulness, as opposed to looking for what in their policies might actually make lots of sense and are fine, and perhaps the things that you could do yourself, and just working out how you can find common ground, as opposed to how you can just conflict more and more. Ultimately, failing to learn from the patterns and experiences around us can create a fear of confronting what we don't know, leading individuals to cling to familiar and comforting heuristics and habits. According to Bion, genuine learning from experience demands the challenging and uncomfortable task of reflecting on your own emotions and just really questioning yourself, which isn't natural and is why the ego will screw you over in so many different situations. Understanding that perspective, I think, just clarifies the difficulty of understanding your own stupidity and why it's so hard to get. And I started with explaining that stupidity is a thing that isn't just down to intellectual power, and explaining how stupidity appears from just lack of brain power and intelligence, but how so many different ways of being unintelligent can appear, and then summed it up with the fact that the ego will just always lie to you about ways that you are being unintelligent, and this is the one that you need to solve. So understanding that perspective does clarify why so many of us frequently just opt for being stupidity as a coping mechanism, as opposed to just really digging into the difficult side of addressing our own problems ourselves. And that bit kind of sucks, but it is the best thing you can possibly do when you start doing it. Whew. And on that, thank you for listening to these 7 different types of stupidity. I hope you learned a profound amount of things and have learned to question why you are so bloody dumb, because you probably are. Jokes, you're a very intelligent person listening to this podcast. Thank you very much. Please leave me a positive rating and tell the world how intelligent you are for listening to this podcast and how great the host is. That would be swell. And have a bloody fantastic week. Look after yourself. Life is to be enjoyed. That starts with enjoying today. That's not a future thing. That's today. And whilst you're enjoying today, be nice to someone else too.